Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Morning Meditations with me, Josh. Welcome back to another study session of the parables. We are wrapping up this three-part parable that Jesus has been talking about with his disciples about seeing. He talks about blind guides, the blind leading the blind, and then he talks about removing the log out of our own eye before we start judging other people and criticizing them and pointing out their flaws. And now he's closing out this teaching that they're all back to back to back with this parable about producing good fruit. And so if you've been following along, we're in Matthew and we're in Luke. And you can find this in Matthew 7, verses 16 through 20. And then you can also find this in Luke chapter 6, verses 43 through 45. And I'm going to read them both because the variations are slight, but they're both very rich, and they kind of add a different sort of element to the depth of how we can go with it. So the first one is Matthew 7, tree and fruit, verse 15. He says, "Watch out for false prophets. They come to you dressed like sheep, but inside they are vicious wolves. You will know them by their fruit. Do people get bunches of grapes from thorny weeds, or do they get figs from thistles? In the same way, every good tree produces good fruit, and every rotten tree produces bad fruit. A good tree can't produce bad fruit, and a rotten tree can't produce good fruit. Every tree that doesn't produce good fruit is chopped down and thrown into the fire. Therefore, you will know them by their fruit." Pretty straightforward. If you look at a person, if you look at their deeds, if you look at the evidence in their life, if you look at the evidence as the description of who they are, instead of the words that they use or the things that they say to describe themselves, or even the things that people will claim are really important to them, or maybe they look really pious on the outside. They're in church every Sunday, and they say the prayers every day, before every meal. They check the boxes on all these things, but inside they're kind of empty, or maybe dark, or they're one way outside to the public, and then behind closed doors they're violent, or they're not what they pretend to be. And so that's what this is really getting at, is looking at the fruit of a person, looking at the evidence of a person to learn rather, not dictate, but to learn who that person is. And it's also a call to self-reflection. A good tree can't produce bad fruit, and a bad tree can't produce good fruit. So is this saying that bad people are damned and that they're never going to be able to produce good fruit in their lives? No. In fact, it's a reflective question where we look at ourselves and we say, who am I right now? Am I a good person? Am I producing good fruit in my life? Where's the evidence? Or am I a bad person? Am I not really all that kind? Am I not loving? Am I just kind of an animal? Because surely you're not producing good fruit then. So we have a choice. We have a choice to be a good tree producing good fruit, or a bad tree producing bad fruit. But we can't be a good person producing bad fruit and a bad person producing good fruit. And you could argue with me if you want to on that, but I didn't write it. It's just right here in black and white. I'd be happy to have that discussion with you. So let's jump over to Luke. All right, Luke, this comes right after the parables that we were reading over the last couple days. And he says this: "A good tree doesn't produce bad fruit, nor does a bad tree produce good fruit." Again, there it is, black and white. "Each tree is known by its own fruit. People don't gather figs from thorny plants, nor do they pick grapes from prickly bushes. A good person produces good fruit from the good treasury of the inner self, while the evil person produces evil from the evil treasury of the inner self. The inner self overflows with words that are spoken." Ooh, interesting. Okay, so now we're getting a little deeper here, talking about the inner self. It was hinted at in Matthew's version, and Luke really opens it up. And I want to read for you something by Thomas Merton. He is a Christian contemplative, tiny little pocketbook here. I keep this with me most of the time. But he says this of the inner self. If I do not know who I am, it is because I think I am the sort of person everyone around me wants me to be. Perhaps I have never asked myself whether I really wanted to become what everybody else seems to want me to become. Perhaps if I only realized that I do not admire what everyone seems to admire, I would really begin to live after all. I would be liberated from the painful duty of saying what I really do not think and acting in a way that betrays God's truth and the integrity of my own soul. So again, it's a call for us, each and every one of us, to reflect deeply on our inner selves. Because from the inner self, everything comes from that, right? Sort of jumping back a couple days ago, let your inner self be full of light and not be full of darkness. And so it's not saying that, if you've been having a rough go at life, or you've gotten it wrong, maybe the majority of the time, that it's too late for you. That's not the case at all. On the contrary, because we all have a choice, because we all have free will, and we all belong to a benevolent creator who loves us deeply, so much so that he gave his son Jesus for us to be transformed, we all have the opportunity to experience an inner transformation that flows out from the innermost parts of us into the rest of our lives. And the evidence for who we truly are lies in the fruit that we bear in our lives. So, what kind of fruit have you been bearing? Are you a barren tree? Are you producing thorns and thistles? Or beautiful, luscious, tasty fruit? Think about it. I love you either way. So does God. See you tomorrow, guys.